Hey everybody, welcome back to another JBoz gaming video. This is your host Gunnar JBoz today. And today we're going to be talking about, well, the game modes and how they impact one another. So let's get into it. The first way that the game modes impact each other is primarily around different challenges and ops that we have and the contracts that we do. So, there's different things you can do within World of Tanks to, receive a reward or to earn something. And those usually come in the form of more challenges that are available to us and also contracts where you can earn tanks. And the reason these impact one another is because Wargaming has to consider both modes when creating these challenges or ops or contracts, because the modes have different tanks, and those tanks have different values. And just as an example, damage or assisted damage is much easier to get in Cold War than it is in World War II, because the tanks do more damage, but they really have more hit points. So there's more hit points to be gotten. So it's much easier to accumulate more damage in Cold War than it is in World War II. Therefore, when you create an op that says do 75,000 damage and you'll get a booster or whatever it is that they give you, well, when you create that op, you have to think 75,000 damage. How many games roughly is that for the average player in Cold War versus the average player in World War II? And it's a lot more games in World War II than it is in Cold War. So if you're a player that only plays World War II, then that means the op is harder for you versus someone that plays only Cold War, and vice versa. There's examples of ops. For example, spotting damage. How do you get spotting damage in Cold War in the True Vision system, and so on. So there's other impacts, and these all have to be considered when Wargaming creates these ops and challenges and contracts for us, or at least they should. I don't know if they are, but they should consider these, that the modes are mixed, and you can use one or the other to complete the op. So that's the first two, is challenges and ops, and then contracts. The third item that I'll bring up is the season. So the season has ops, has daily ops and weekly ops. Same thing there, right? So that impacts how they create the season ops for us. And then kind of continuing along with the season and the impact of the modes, in the season you have tanks that are awarded, either World War II tanks or Cold War tanks. Well, if you're a player that only plays one mode over the other, then you value the award of the other mode's tanks a lot less. And so when you're when you're looking at the new season and you're excited to start the new season, and you see, well, you're going to get a bunch of Cold War tanks, that might diminish your eagerness to jump into the season and purchase even the standard pass, let alone the ultimate pass, which is an additional caveat here. Is also another reason that the modes impact one another. Because in the ultimate pass, if it's a Cold War tank and you're only playing World War II, why would you drop 6,000 gold on a bundle like that when you won't even use the tank? And so there's less incentive to buy the bundle for the season. And so, yeah, the awards definitely impact across the modes. If you only play Cold War, the same is true in that you may not value World War II tanks, and I don't blame you. You just would. They're not the tanks that you play on a regular basis. So why would you, first of all, spend actual gold on tanks that you probably won't play? And of course, why would you be excited about a season that's going to award you tanks that you probably won't play? Season rewards is impacted, and then also the season pass as well. Especially the ultimate pass is directly impacted. And then that kind of extends into the other store stuff, like bundles. I've seen in the past mixed bundles where they were selling a bundle that had Cold War and World War II tanks. And again, same principle applies. Now, the good news is I haven't seen too many of those mixed bundles of late. So maybe Wargaming got the hint that very few people bought that bundle, and that's probably not a good idea to mix tanks in a bundle. And then personal offers are the same situation, as well as the weekly offers are also, again, if you only care about one mode and only play one mode, there's less value to you in getting offered a tank at a steep discount. There's less chance of you taking that offer because it's very little value to you. So personal offers and deals of the week are 8 and 9. Number 10, this is getting a little more interesting. 9 is splitting the player base. When you have maybe 30-40% of the player base playing one mode and 60 or 70% playing the other mode, then they're split. It doesn't matter which mode has the majority players. Both are harmed because there's less players for both modes to make efficient matchmaking and quicker matches and more balanced matches. That's just the truth of it. So both modes are harmed by splitting the player base because it splits the matchmaker. And then, of course, I don't think a lot of people think about this, but if you have a finite number of developers as a company and you have 2 games or modes that you're trying to support, well, you have to split those resources accordingly, or at least in some form or fashion. And therefore, both modes suffer because not all resources are dedicated on making the bug fixes, the feature enhancements that everybody wants for their mode, and it just slows everything down. So it literally hurts the game itself by having both modes exist. So number 11 is the economies. In Cold War, you earn more silver. The rate of earn of silver is higher in Cold War, and it makes sense. Those tanks are more expensive, and they're more expensive to equip. So to try to make the grind less numb-minding, they have a different economy. Of course, this is more one-sided. Both modes don't impact each other in the same equal way here, because obviously if you're gaining a lot of silver and more silver in Cold War, you can jump down to World War II and spend that silver on cheaper tanks, cheaper equipment, and buy more. The silver goes further. The reverse is not true. Where World War II, you would have to play a lot more games in order to earn enough silver to really progress in Cold War. And so this is the one area where Cold War is bad for World War II, but World War II, I don't know really how it affects Cold War in that sense. But it's not healthy for the game either way. And so that's why it's on my list. The economies impact one another. And then, of course, another kind of going back to the store, kind of finishing it out, is the key cards. When they started to put Cold War tanks on key cards, well, that devalued key cards to maybe World War II only players and vice versa. If you're a Cold War player, why on earth would you buy a key card when the good chance is you will get a World War II tank if you only play Cold War? I don't understand why you would spend money on a key card. So, yeah, so that one of those areas that the different modes impact one another. And then the 13th and last reason I have is around just extenuating the player confusion issue, the player knowledge issue. World of Tanks console is a tough entry game, meaning if you start to play World of Tanks, there's a steep learning curve. In fact, that learning curve is cut off at a certain point. Unless being shared by another player, or in this case, a YouTube video from a player that happens to create a YouTube channel to help other players, you wouldn't know a lot of the stuff that's in the game, because Wargaming does such a poor job of sharing their game with their players about how to play, how to be successful, and so on. And so the reason this exacerbates that is when you're a new player and you start playing World of Tanks, today you might start with Cold War, and most do, and you you are starting to learn the mechanics, and if no one is telling you, right, well, these mechanics are true here, but if you go to that other mode, they're different. Well, no one tells you that, right? So when you go to World War II, you're like, where's the missiles? Where's the smoke? And how do I use these things here? And right, you're looking for those things, and you certainly don't know why you're getting killed by invisible tanks. This feels dumb, right? And so because there isn't that adequate training and certainly that adequate knowledge share about each mechanic in the mode, players certainly struggle and are challenged even further with learning how to play World of Tanks. And I would argue that even knowledgeable players about the mechanics for both modes are more challenged than they would normally be. For example, if you just jump into a Cold War game and play it, and then jump over to a World War II game and play it, I think, I haven't statistically proven this, but I think you're not as in tune to the mechanics as you should be. And I think you would do better if you played, just World War II that day, and then the next day only played Cold War, and not jumped back and forth to the modes, because then your mind is able to adjust, and you're able to rewire what you need to do for that particular session of tank. Now, some people might be able to do this, but I think they're far and few between, and it takes people time to adjust. And because part of the mechanics is not just knowing them, but almost intuitively reacting real time in game, applying those mechanics that you are aware. And because it's almost muscle memory, it's very hard to change that muscle memory very quickly. And so the quicker you jump between modes, the worse off I think you're going to see performance. And so to optimize your performance, I think at best, it's dedicated sessions in the modes versus just, at random, whatever I'm going to play. Not that it's wrong to do that, and you should do that if you enjoy it. I'm simply saying that it does impact those people that do know that there are different mechanics in the modes and know what those mechanics are and know how to apply them appropriately. So that was my rant, if you will, of 13 reasons or 13 things the modes impact one another about. And so if you've been following this series for long, you know when I do a rant video, I like to offer solutions. And there's no perfect solution here, of course. But the first solution I would offer up is separate the modes. They should not be intermixed. They should have their own stores. They should have their own seasons. That's first and foremost. Their own economies. The stores and season and economy should be separated. And if you want to leave the modes together in the same console game, okay. But the modes should be separated. The ultimate solution, though I don't know if it only addresses one more of the three that aren't addressed if you split the modes. The three that I mentioned that would not be addressed by just splitting the modes are splitting of the player base, splitting the developers, and then the confusion of the game. Those will not be fixed by splitting of the modes. Now, the last one, the confusion, I think would help if you split the modes, because I think people would kind of start to make a permanent decision about what they want to spend their time on and not jump around. It certainly would probably reduce the number of people that are actually playing Cold War today, unfortunately, because I know a lot of people that are playing Cold War because it's a silver grind, and you can make a lot of silver over there very quickly, and then you can come over to World War II and spend that silver. But yeah, I think it would make people make a conscious choice. I think it would make people tend to play one on a given day and another on a different day, or at least split just jumping around, because you have to jump out of the mode to jump to the other mode. And I think that would help a little bit. Players truly get comfortable with the mechanics within a particular mode that they want to play. But I don't think it fixes it, perfectly or ideally, and it certainly wouldn't address the other two, and that's the splitting of the player base and the splitting of the developers. I think the only solution here is to really make them two separate games. And unfortunately, I don't think Wargaming is going to do this. I don't think there's enough players to support the Cold War, at least at this point, and therefore they are not going to split the games. It's much harder and more costly to create a new game and get it approved on the platform, be it Microsoft or Sony. So it's just more cost entry that they already know may not have the payback at the end of the day. And so, and even this, literally splitting them into separate games, doesn't really address the splitting of the player base and the splitting of the developers, because you'd still need to split the developers. They're working on 2 different games, not just 2 different modes now. They're working on 2 different games. And then also, it would still split the player base. There would still be some people that play Cold War and some people that play World War II. So it doesn't really address that either. But what I think it would address is it would clearly define whether Cold War specifically can sustain itself, which at this point I think it's highly suspect whether it could as a separate game. And therefore I would, again, challenge Wargaming to then, stop supporting that game and move their resources back to where the majority of players tend to spend their time. And if that happens to be in World War II, so be it. If it happens to be in Cold War, so be it. But one should win out, and ultimately there should be one World of Tanks console game. Other people would offer up, maybe you extend the tech tree, and instead of splitting modes, you bring those tech trees back into, or take World War II and put them up into whatever. The mechanics are not the same, guys, and it still would require 2 separate development staffs to support whatever you do, and that would be much more complex than just splitting the modes. So hopefully not ideal, but that is my recommended solutions. I think the easiest one and the most straightforward one is just to split the modes right away. I think that will kind of even answer the question before you have to actually create a separate game, because I don't think you're going to get there anyway. But yeah, that's my thoughts on that. Hopefully you guys have thoughts as well, so leave them in the comments below. If I miss something that the modes impact one another on, good or bad, let me know. I'd love to extend my list and hear what you all have to say. Certainly give me your thoughts about what you think the solutions should be. And if you don't want to leave them in the comments, catch me on Gunner live stream. I'll probably try to do that Saturday nights. So hit me up and chat live. I'd love to see your perspective and get your comments there as well. All right. Until we meet again, keep tanking, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.